All right, welcome back, everyone. Um, we have Elena Van Hove as Energy Strategy and Implementation Leader, focused on resilient power systems in developing and vulnerable regions, as Director of Strategy and Partnerships at Arizona State University's Laboratory for Energy and Power Solutions. She works with governments, development partners, and project teams to move distributed energy initiatives from planning to implementation. Her work bridges technical analysis, institutional coordination, programmatic, programmatic policy with a focus on designing energy solutions that are practical, durable, and responsive to local needs. So in Fiji, Elena has helped lead ASU's work to accelerate rural electrification through solar mini grids, supporting community assessments, stakeholder engagement, investment preparation, and implementation planning for remote island communities. So we're happy to have her share her work in Fiji.
Great, thank you, Ray. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. So first, thank you to the Xendee team for having me this week. Xendee has been a partner of Arizona State University for many years now, which we've been very happy about, including on the work we started in Fiji 3 years ago. So today I'm going to be sharing a little bit about that project that we started together and sharing how Xendee had an impact in what we developed. So let me kick us off here. Okay, so to start, a little bit of background on the Laboratory for Energy and Power Solutions. So we are a 30-person team within Arizona State University, and we're a unique university group in that we really focus on how can we bring the knowledge and resources that exist within a university out into the world, to help people around the world. And so we focus on clean, resilient, and equitable energy for all. We've supported the mobilization of about $330 million of investment around the world, worked in across 20 countries, supporting the implementation of about 160 megawatts of power. So we do that through what you can see on the bottom of the screen, master planning, solutions brokering, project development, and then we also train about 1,000 people a year. So one of those projects that we started a few years ago, or really programs, because it became several projects in one, is working in Fiji. So we were connected through partners there and learned that Fiji has about 300 communities across the nation, depending on how you count, 300 to 400. Across the nation that lack reliable electricity access. And so we partnered with Xendee, the Global Green Growth Institute, funded through the US Trade and Development Agency, to start by completing feasibility assessments for these sites. So what we learned was to raise funding for project implementation, specifically through mini grids, off-grid mini grid systems. Donors and investors needed more information about the site. If it's a equity or grant or equity or debt type investment, they're going to have questions around the financeability and the bankability. If you're looking at philanthropic donors, then they're going to have questions about, for instance, how many schools or how many health centers, households, etc. So what we did is we partnered to actually start by completing those feasibility assessments. And what the program then turned into was providing a broader ecosystem of support for rural electrification in the nation. And that's really fostered a lot of lessons learned and sharing across the Pacific region. And so for the effort, we really took an integrated approach. And that was looking at how electricity was really an enabler of so many other areas in the community. So from clean water access, whether that's pumping and purification, healthcare, education, even just basic access to telecom. So for instance, the projects, and you'll learn they're being implemented now. have Starlink and Starlink, for instance, or other forms of internet connectivity. You need power for it. And so it really creates a big difference in these rural communities to have a um, affordable and reliable source of power, where previously they were relying on small solar torches and sometimes a diesel generator. And so, an overview, we started with remote GIS assessment, went into site visitation, specifically of 75 sites. Then we completed remote site analysis, and this was business model, technical assessment, et cetera. And then finally moved into developing tenders for a competitive bid for to be done for these sites to construct them, and then ultimately own and operate the systems. And I'll talk about that and how that went into the enabling environment that we created. So starting with remote GIS assessment, it can be a difficult process to actually decide how do you prioritize which sites are selected first. So we had different criteria. Some were deselection criteria, for instance, related to where the EFL grid, EFL is the local utility, if a site was close to that, therefore it didn't need to be considered to this program. Of course, a resort or a private island was left out, etc. There were also prioritization criteria related to building number was a proxy, for instance, for total population, health centers or schools being either within the community or nearby. And then there was diversification criteria. So for instance, you'll see on the right-hand side of this map, there's a lot of islands in Fiji that are very remote. They're only reached typically by a ferry that goes out about once a month. And so we wanted to make sure though those sites were less populated, they would still be included in the feasibility assessment and ultimately in the priority sites. So next we moved into site visitation. Myself and colleagues, another colleague, Dylan from ASU, were able to enjoy the beautiful Fijian islands and learn a lot about the rural communities. So during these site visits, we completed community engagement, explaining these projects, getting an understanding of what the community interest is in a power system project, whether they would like to have one. Some, for instance, already had solar home systems that met their needs. Then we completed a demand estimation for electricity generation or for electricity demand. This can be a challenging process to assess, as any experts in the field would know, as it's challenging for somebody to guess how much electricity they're going to use if they haven't had grid level electricity before. And there's no historic proxy within Fiji, as in there haven't been a lot of mini grids before this. And then finally, the land assessment, because you need to know where to install the solar panels and so on. So this is just a little bit of information on how we did that demand estimation. We partnered with a wonderful company called Comet. Highly recommend them. So they actually allow for a gamified version for communities to essentially simulate what would their household use. And then not only that, but respond to, they actually get a bill at the end of the simulation, so to speak. And they actually can respond to, oh, that's a pretty high bill. I'm going to use a little bit less electricity, maybe not have my TV on that many hours. So it kind of also gives them a sense for the cost, which is very helpful. Then we went into site analysis. So by the numbers as an overview, there were 75 sites that were visited across 30 islands. We engaged with over 3,000 people, which was really exciting. Or 17,000 was the population across those 75 sites. And then that included 84 schools, 52 health clinics, and over 250 shops. Yeah, so really broad reach. So going from that, we went into the technical design process of our feasibility study to prepare appropriate metrics to develop the tender. So you can kind of see a flow chart. We would start with the energy demand estimation that we would create load profiles in Python, then go into a distribution network analysis through using ArcGIS and ETAP, a power system modeler, assessing things like voltage drop, cable size, etc. Um, with that, with our voltage drop levels, we would add that to the load profile and ultimately have a load profile with our distribution network losses. And then we would go into Xendee and use Xendee for the mini grid asset selection and sizing. And what was especially helpful at the time was it was our first experience using the Xendee API feature, in which we were able to batch process, which when you're working across 75 sites, that really makes a big difference. Otherwise, you have somebody that's clicking 75 different times, and then you change one input, and you have to redo it. So that API was really very helpful and probably saved the team hundreds of hours, frankly. Yeah, and then we come out with those CapEx, O&M costs, etc. So here you can see a couple of examples of GIS layouts. These just give kind of a basic layout for what is the system boundary, where the power system is going to be located, etc. Here you can see the validated low voltage systems, just making sure they're within voltage requirements. Yeah, and then using Xendee, we were able to capture these high-level metrics for the techno-economic analysis. And so that included CapEx, very important. So for the team to understand how much funding would need to be raised. Something I didn't go over is um, what we are actually supporting is the Fiji Rural Electrification Fund, or FREF. So FREF was developed by the Fijian government. Its steering committee and board of directors is made up of permanent secretaries within the Fijian government. And it was essentially created as a vehicle to support private sector engaging in rural electrification, as it was outside of the capacity of the Department of Energy to be able to build, manage, and become a rural utility, essentially. And so the implementing partner for that is UNDP, a wonderful partner of ours for years now. And yeah, and so in raising funds for these projects, they needed to know, of course, high level values. The values you see here is actually a little bit on the higher side for initial estimates. I think we ended up closer to $40 million total in CapEx expenditures, but it gives you an idea. Again, the helpful input of Xendee to be able to kind of iterate on those. One other thing I'll highlight here is kind of the usefulness of using Xendee as a tool to engage with our stakeholders. So for instance, one of the things when we first did our system sizing that we heard back on was, these systems look really big. We would anticipate that they're closer, let's say it's, I'm going to make some numbers up here. Well, maybe I'll make these up on the screen. Let's say we're estimating our demand is around 16 kilowatts. We would anticipate that the solar PV sizing is around that size as well. So they were surprised. Oh, I see. It's not a one-to-one here. But they were surprised when the system was being sized a lot bigger, let's say even double. So we came back and we were actually able to show, well, if you're sizing your PV assets to be around your peak capacity, what's happening is your generator is taking over all those hours. And as we know, you're ferrying out diesel fuel out to these remote islands. That's very costly. Versus if you oversize the system, you're able to charge the batteries, and you're really only using your diesel generator in those early morning or late evening hours. This was one example. And they were able to validate that. They shared, yes, that is the case. The smaller systems that we've been sizing, we're ending up having to use the diesel generator. And so it was a really helpful conversation tool to kind of be able to quickly iterate and share, this is how our results came out this way versus what you might anticipate, and this is why. So going into tender and enabling environment. So once we had all these inputs, technical inputs, system sizing, etc., we actually supported with our partners UNDP for them to develop the tender documents for 75 sites. And so this is the competitive bid process through which EPC developers actually around the world, but you got to be based in Fiji. You got to be willing to work in Fiji if you want to implement the projects and operate them, of course. But the 75 sites, so we developed the tender documents for them, actually completed geotechnical assessments for 21 sites. So one thing that we, for instance, learned, um, geotechnical assessments are another important point to make sure to de-risk the projects that you're developing. As if you don't know what kind of soil you're getting into, that can really be an issue to be able to, for instance, install the solar racking systems. So we completed those for 21 sites, which is moving forward into the first batch. Um, we actually also worked with them for those first 21 sites to develop cooperatives. I'll go into the business model here in a second. And for 3 sites, the tenders have been awarded. That occurred, I believe, end of last year. So that was kind of the first stage to go out. And those have started construction. And the next 5 sites are anticipated sometime this year. And so, another important aspect of this project is really the innovation of the business model and partnership model for rural electrification. And I really have to thank our colleagues at UNDP for developing this and having really a sense of the local ecosystem within Fiji. So what they've developed is a joint venture model where FREF, the Fiji Rural Electrification Fund, which is a nonprofit organization, is able to enter into a joint venture with a private sector partner. And this is the EPC. And what this does is it actually allows for the community to have a role and ownership in the business. And it kind of, I like to think of it as the best of both worlds for the systems. In the case of the private sector partner in EPC has their technical expertise. However, oftentimes, especially rural communities that are very close-knit, they want representation in the systems or in the businesses that are local. So, for instance, in the US, I think it's something like 60% of our distribution network is managed by electric co-ops. And so FREF actually works with local co-ops for doing basic operation and maintenance, things like tariff collection support, etc. And then with time, there's kind of the opportunity for this to take on a variety of roles, whether it's a co-op becoming fully independent and running their mini grid system, the joint venture ending up between the community partner or FREF long term and the private sector partner, or there's also the opportunity for the private sector partner long term to end up as the sole owner of the project. So there's kind of that built-in flexibility into the model. The last thing I'll add is this CapEx breakdown. So you will see, as is common for rural electrification, there's about an 80% subsidy on CapEx in order to make these projects bankable. Yeah, and so the last thing I'll add is how this developed into a broader area of work that we've been working on in the past 12 months for supporting the enabling environment of mini grids in Fiji. Yeah, and then sharing those lessons learned across the Pacific. And so the first area is in the regulatory environment. So this has to do with there was really a lack of any framework, a vacuum of framework or a tariff setting process, etc. And so what we did is we've been working with the Fiji Consumer and Corporation Commission, the regulator, to actually develop a regulatory framework, support the implementation of a tariff setting process, etc., and even capacity building within the regulator to understand these new technologies that they're having to oversee now. On the other side, there is a workforce gap within Fiji, and so to be able to actually manage technicians, to be able to install the systems, etc. And so for that, we've partnered with the Center for Appropriate Technology and Development, CATD, as well as University of South Pacific, USP, to develop various training modules. CATD more at let's say, people coming out of the village so that they have access to education that's appropriate to them and kind of vocational skill building. That's the right term for it. Versus USP is more for advanced professionals, kind of gaining additional certifications. Yeah, and with that, that's all I got. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and yeah, really happy to answer questions.
Right. Thanks so much. We'll go through the questions. We have 4 minutes left. So first question is, I'm not sure if there's already constructed or operational, but do you have any sense of how accurate the load profiles that you were able to model in the first place?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? So the systems are not fully constructed and live yet, so we don't have an answer, but we are um, anxiously anticipating, yeah, what the outcome will be. So you have
Right.
to stay tuned.
Yep. And a follow-up question with that is, do you also model like increased demand year over year?
Just a slight one. It's something like 1 to 2%. For, I believe, the first 5 years. But after that, you plan for additional capacity expansion. So very
Mm,
little year to year demand increase. If you'd like to, feel free to reach out if you'd like to have a more detailed discussion. There's a lot of nitty-gritty to get into, and we have a full explanation of our load estimation model.
I see. I see. And then regarding the JV, would you be able to provide more info on how, the PSP only provide 10% of the capex, but owns 50% of the JV?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's 80% of the CapEx is provided by development partners. 10% ends up being put up by the private sector partner, and then 10% is provided by the Otoki Affairs Board, which is it's like a government investor, I'll call it. And so when you look at the capital that's being brought in by non-donors, it's actually a one-to-one match between the private sector partner and then what the government and therefore representing FREF's stake is bringing in. I'm not sure if they actually end up on 50% or 49-51, swinging one way or the other. But it is an important question, and I think it comes back to that the donor and development partners aren't looking to have a business stake in the resulting project that's built.
I see. I see. And related to that, question from Colby, what were the challenges in developing the regulatory framework?
Oh man. Just to choose one. I'm gonna say the hardest part was creating a regulatory framework that allows for flexibility because but still provides enough standardization and direction to create a market to support the development of these projects. And what I mean by that is you want to provide enough guidance, especially in the tariff framework, so that there's clarity, especially like investor clarity to be able to develop these projects. However, you can't plan for everything. You really can't. And so we really wanted to include enough flexibility in the framework so that it can adapt. That's the word I was looking for, adapt over time. Yeah.
I see. I see. I'll leave that as the last question. We have a ton of questions, but we'll address that through email. Thanks so much, Elena, for sharing your experience and the work you've done with Fiji. And for the rest of the audience, if you want to have to join the next session on the training, you need to leave the session and join the next Zoom link. All right. Again, thanks so much, Elena. Have a good
Great.
day.
Thanks for having me. Bye.